welcome to Deadly Dames. So I thought I'd do a quick video reviewing Stephen King's The Stand. The main reason for this, I've literally just finished reading it and I want to make sure that I do the review whilst all the events of the book are still fresh in my mind. So I'm going to do it nice and easy. I don't want to, because I've tried to do reviews before for books and you end up going into pretty much, it'd be just as good to open it and start reading the book to you, because you spend 30-40 minutes talking about every character and every event of it, and no one wants to hear that. You want to keep it to the level where I'm telling you what I think of the book, but I'm not telling you everything about it, so it's going to ruin you reading the book. So for me, I'm going to do the good, what I really liked about it, and remember, these are just my opinions, the bad, and overall what I thought. So the good parts of The Stand were, also, you know, Stephen King is probably the most famous horror writer, and there's a few reasons as to why he's like that. Obviously the stories he comes up with, but also the way that he writes. He writes in such a way that it doesn't matter what level of reader that you are. His books are done in a nice, easy, flowing way. There's no words in there that's been put in just for basically to make the audience have to Google what it actually means. It's written in a way that it just flows nice and easily. And that's one of the things that I really like about Stephen King. So this story, what I really liked about it is it's basically in 3 parts. So the beginning of the book is all about the virus being released. The middle bit is basically about the survivors grouping together and starting to make a new community, and then the end's obviously the big conclusion. Okay, so I really like the start of the book. I like the way that he read about the virus and how easily it spreads, and obviously it's very relevant to what's happening just now in the world. But the way that he writes this, it's actually really scary, because you see one character who managed, because it's man-made, the virus in this, one character spreads it to 5, who then go out into the world and spread it to 10, and each of those 10 spread it to 10. And it's really scary seeing how fast it spreads. And that bit kind of scared me a little bit reading it, but it's the way he writ it again. They are introduced to characters, and this is part of the bad, because I didn't like any of the characters. I was trying to find a nice way to put that. It's really hard to enjoy, overly enjoy a book when you do not sympathise with any of the characters. There's one character in this book which I sympathised with, and it's the character Trash Can Man. And Trash Can Man is actually, he's kind of portrayed in it as a bad guy, but I'll come back to that in a second. But the reason why I sympathised with him is because his life was just miserable. He was bullied, he was mistreated by his dad, he was mistreated by everybody that he met, and he was basically a victim of other people's actions. And yeah, he does bad things. So I'm not saying setting people on fire or blowing them up is a good thing. I'm just saying that I sympathise with how he got there because of the way he was treated. Not everybody gets treated like that, goes down the route as him, but I sympathised with the way he was treated, if that makes sense. So he was really the only character that I had any sympathy for, any sort of, when I'm reading it, care for him. The rest of the characters, I didn't particularly like them. It was really hard to warm to somebody or care if somebody died or if someone lived, because I didn't actually like the characters, and that's one of the things that I didn't like about this book. I loved the way he wrote them and the way that he described the characters. I just didn't like the characters. What I did like, though, that Stephen King did is this book, if you've watched the miniseries, I watched the miniseries before reading the book, and it's one of the reasons why I put the book off for so long, is because I really didn't want to picture like Molly Ringwald as one of the characters, which kept happening as I was reading it. In the movie, the miniseries, sorry, it makes out like it's the definitive good and evil, and these guys are going to Randall Flagg, and these ones are destined to go to Mother Abigail. But in the book, it's nothing like that. In humanity, regardless of the book, so let's go to the real world. Every single person has the potential to be bad and to be good. There is no, you are a bad person, you are a good person. You make your decisions, which takes you in those directions. And Stephen King touches on that absolutely perfectly in this, because all of the characters, apart from one, which I'll get back to, has dreams about both Mother Abigail and Randall Flagg. They are just normal people who aren't the best people. I mean, for example, the character of Larry. Larry's not a nice person, and he does end up being like one of the heroes. He is a one-hit wonder, a rock star who takes drugs and drink, cares about no one. He uses women. He's not particularly nice to his family, and he grows through it, which is, again, another thing that Stephen King does really well, is that he shows characters developing and becoming better people, but he's actually not a very nice person. And that's part of the good thing about this as well, is that he shows that the human traits that people have, as I said, there's no definitive you're bad, you're good. Every single person has that potential to make the decision for themselves. And I really enjoyed that in it, because it showed you the true human element, like real life. And I loved that in the book itself. I liked the way that he, to start with, told the story. So you had a good bit about Nick and a good bit about Trash Can Man, sort of getting a bit of their background and how they got to where they were when the virus started. What I didn't like is when you got to part 2 of the book. So once the characters had chosen either Randall Flagg or Mother Abigail, and they were sort of divided, and the main group of characters were with Mother Abigail, it then became, I don't want to say political, but it was kind of like that. Like they formed a committee to try and make decisions. They wanted to have a court system. They wanted to have a police force. Now, there's a reason why Stephen King did this, and again, I'll come back to that. But there's a reason why Stephen King did it, but it was so boring. I would love to put it in a much more eloquent way, but really, it was boring. I didn't want to hear the 50 millionth committee meeting. I just wasn't interested in it. I know he did it because he was trying to show, which is a question at the end of the book as well, that no matter what happens to humanity, because the virus was man-made, so man did it to themselves, man and women I should say, people did it to themselves, but it's just showing that basically they don't learn from we don't learn from our past mistakes when it comes to building. It's always been like that with humans, like we're constantly striving to do better, to do more, and that's kind of what happened in this. So even though they had gone through this massive catastrophe of the pandemic and the virus killing a lot of people, that the first thing they did was start to rebuild what they already had before, whether or not it had worked before. So let's get a police force, let's get a committee together. These are things that probably led, maybe not necessarily the police force, but things like committee and forming heads of something is probably what led to the virus being made in the first place. People in charge. And I know he put that in there to sort of show that no matter what happens, people will do that again. They'll build in the image of what was before rather than starting new. And I get why he was doing it. I understand that bit completely, but I just found all the meetings really hard to read. It was a proper slog, and it's what I started reading this book at the start of lockdown, and that's me just finished, because when I hit that part 2, I had to force myself to get through it. When it gets back to part 3, it's really good, and you're back to, because it's weird when they're doing the committee, you hardly talk about Randall Flagg, and he's obviously he's the bad guy, he's the person that everybody's fighting against. But when it gets back to part 3 and you get back to obviously the spies going to his camp and what happens to those spies, and then the 3 main heroes going at the end, I didn't actually like the way that I thought the way it was written, and it was really tense and you were on your toes. I liked that, but what I didn't like was part of why the storyline kind of annoyed me a little bit, because they sent these spies to Las Vegas where Randall Flagg was, but there really wasn't like a purpose to it, because when Mother Abigail came back, she sent 4 other people there anyway to end it. And I know obviously she didn't know there were spies sent, but it just felt like those 3 characters were basically cannon fodder and they didn't need to die. It's even a wee bit like when they send, I should have said there's some spoilers, when they send the 4 guys at the end to face off against Randall Flagg. Technically, they didn't need to go. So at the end of the book, Trash Can Man, he ends up being the downfall of Randall Flagg. He becomes a bit of a joke, and because of that he reverts back to I've been bullied, I'm going to do something stupid mode like he did when he was younger. And he ends up blowing up Randall Flagg's army that he's been building, because Trash Can Man's been collecting all the bombs and all the the trucks and things like that to form an army, and he ends up blowing them up, and effectively he's what cripples Randall Flagg. But to make it up to him, he runs away, but he goes to try and find a weapon that will make Randall Flagg forgive everything he's done, and he finds an A-bomb. Now, he takes that to Las Vegas right at the moment when Randall Flagg's trying to make a big show, make people believe in him again. Because there's a few things that happened throughout the story. So when I said that every character was having dreams about whether to go to Mother Abigail or to Randall Flagg, the only character that didn't was Nadine, who turned out she'd been promised to Randall Flagg as his wife and bearer of his child. Because the thing about Randall Flagg is, and this is what makes it really difficult when I was reading it, but it doesn't matter to anybody else if they pick it up to read, because this was written before the Dark Towers, but because I had read the Dark Towers before this, and Randall Flagg's a massive character in that, I already knew that he isn't human. He's a creature that can be in many forms over many types of worlds. And it is described in this, he's described kind of as a devil, a demon. And because he's like that, that's why she was promised to him. So she only ever has dreams about Randall Flagg. So she's like the odd one out. But right near the third part, he actually starts to lose control. So he's able to see people come in, know what everybody's doing, and he can't find the third spy for other reasons. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that when he does capture the second spy, she was able to fight back enough with him to kill herself so he couldn't get the information out of her for the third spy. And that made his people start to doubt him because someone was able to fight back against him. And then the third thing that really pushed the people against him, or lose their belief in him, was when Nadine was able to taunt him and push his buttons enough that he actually killed her, and she was pregnant with his kid. Although she was promised him and she'd waited her whole life for him, when she finally realised that he was a demon, it broke her. She couldn't recover from that experience, and that, because she was able to do that, and obviously the other folk were able to do that against him, his own people lost faith in him. And even if they hadn't sent the 4 people to Las Vegas, they were still going to lose faith in him, and people were still going to start leaving him because he was losing control. And Trash Can Man was still going to turn up with that atomic bomb. And when Trash Can Man turns up, he is radiation started to have an effect on his hair's falling out, his skin's all blistered. Yeah, they could probably try and get that bomb away, but who's going to want to touch that? And yes, his people would run the minute he turns up with that. So the only difference that sending those 4 people to their death made, well, it was 3 because Stu broke his leg, but was that when one of his followers, right at the end, there's 2 of them left, the third person had died. And in the miniseries, actually, they're on crosses, but in the books, it's much more gross. They put them in a cage with chains attached to their legs and their arms, and they're going to quarter them. They're going to rip them to bits. But one of his followers, who was going to leave because he'd lost all faith in him, starts shouting up in the crowd that this isn't us, why are we doing this? We don't need to follow him. And Randall Flagg actually burns him with a blue spark from his hand. And it's that spark which ends up hitting the A-bomb and blowing them up. So technically, if that follower didn't shout up against what they were going to do to these 2 guys, the spark wouldn't have hit the A-bomb. So I get that. That's why they went. They called it the Hand of God, the followers of Mother Abigail, but technically it was Randall Flagg's own doing that he blew up. So technically that bit wouldn't have happened, but the atomic bomb still would have leaked radiation, and his followers would still have left because of that. So Trash Can Man was always going to bring that there anyway. So that annoyed me, because I kept thinking there was no real purpose to her sending people to Las Vegas to die. It felt to me like it was really just put in there as a conclusion, and it's not really a conclusion. The conclusion itself is actually right at the end, when humanity's starting to rebuild itself, and the character Fran turns to Stu and says, do you think people basically have learned a lesson? Sorry, he says it to her, and she says, I don't know. And then he says, I don't know. And that's the truth of the matter. Like, I don't think people, I think some will, but I don't actually think there's an overall learning from experience when it comes to the people. They're still, I mean, at the end, they got electricity back on. They, as I said, formed a committee and a and a law system and police forces and everything that was there before, which became corrupt, was happening again. And that's really what Stephen King was saying to you in this story, is that bad things happen, but are you really going to put things in place to stop it from happening again? And in his book, probably not. And that's the end. Like, I don't know. I did really enjoy the first half of the book, as I said. I really enjoyed the end, apart from a few things where I kept thinking there was no real reason for that to happen. The middle was extremely difficult to get through. It was so painstaking. But that's just my opinion. I don't want to read half a book about a committee. I would recommend that everybody reads this at least once. I wouldn't personally read it again, but I'm glad that I read it once. The main reason for it is because, one, it's scary. Like, the beginning of this book's really scary, and the idea that somewhere, for some reason, you survive when millions didn't, it scares me. Seeing everybody around about you like die. I had a family member who was really sick with coronavirus, and it was really scary seeing that happen. And that's what it's like in this book. Like, it is really scary if someone's not well and it gets to the decision where these people don't, and then you're like, but why me? And that part is fantastic in the book, and the whole description about how quickly the virus spreads is amazing. So it is worth it for the beginning and the end, but not so much the middle. If you've read The Stand, I would very much like to know what you think about it. If you've not read it and you decide to, please let me know what you think. If my reviews put you off, I do apologise, but it is really, really worth reading it, purely just for the beginning and the end. I'm going to try and pick a smaller book, because this doesn't look very big, but look at the size of the writing in there. This was a big book to try and work through. So I think I'm going to go for a much smaller book next time, give myself a little bit of a break. But as always, I'm still trying to find my feet with the book reviews. I do want to talk about them, because if it wasn't for books or scripts or graphic novels, we wouldn't get movies. And I think it's important to encourage people to read these things. I mean, thousands of people love the movie The Shining, but the book's completely different. Thousands of people love Carrie, but the book's got massive bits in it that aren't in the film. And I think it's one of these things that, because, I mean, The Shining is so different from the book that technically they're two different things. And I would always recommend reading The Shining. But yeah, I love Stanley Kubrick's movie as well. That wasn't even a name that came out, but you know who I'm talking about. I forgot where my point was, but my point is, I think that writing and reading should be encouraged, and if it wasn't for books and novels and graphic novels, we wouldn't have the brilliant TV shows or movies that we have today. So I do want to talk about them. I want to celebrate the written word. But if there's any improvements you can think I would do to these reviews, please let me know. I'm still trying to find my feet with them. And as always, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and take care.